Welcome, everyone. I'm Barbara Kaufman, Executive Vice President and COO at Newark Regional Business Partnership. I hope all of you are weathering the storm and that not too many of you are out of power. We are challenged this morning in that one of our presenters has no power both at the office and at home. So we're trying to work out so that he can join with us this morning. My role today will be to talk about the logistics, thank our sponsor, 3E Public Relations, which we'll do so again during the program, and just go through some of the things that are coming up. I'll start with that. This week we have today's webinar. Next week on August 13th, we will be hearing about cybersecurity from Citrin Cooperman, sponsored by Citrin Cooperman. And that is a really important topic. I urge all of you to participate. The number of cyber attacks with remote work has increased dramatically since COVID began. And this is an opportunity to learn some things you can do to protect yourself and your business. On August 18th, we're going to have the second installment of our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion mini-series. We began that yesterday with Ryan Haygood, the President and CEO of New Jersey Institute of Social Justice. And Ryan talked to us about filling the cracks in the foundation and all of the systemic issues that have plagued us for so many years and ways that we can address them, and ways that individuals can act. If you're interested in seeing that presentation, we can make the recording available to you. It was available to everybody that was on that call, but anybody else that's interested can contact us. Then in September, we're going to have 2 additional installments of that series. The first one will be on law enforcement and community police relations. It will be led by Andrea McChriston, who is from New Jersey Institute of Social Justice, and participants will be Peter Harvey, the independent monitor, the Deputy Chief of Police, the New York Police Department, someone from the New York Community Street Team, and Equal Justice. That's on August 18th at noon. It's August 18th at noon. In September, we'll be doing Hire by Live Newark, what's next, and then we'll be doing healthcare and education. Both of those will be scheduled in September, and we'll be announcing the speakers. We also have our golf outing at Rock City Golf Club on September 14th. It will be the first in-person event we've had since the beginning of March. So I really hope all of you who are golfers will come out and support our 501c3 foundation. It's a great opportunity to be able to network with fellow business people who you all haven't seen in a very long time. And this is a wonderful opportunity. Plus, it also supports NRBP's 501c3 foundation. So contact me if you're interested in that. We also have sponsorship opportunities if you're not a golfer and you'd like to help out with the event. We are looking for other topics that you and or your firm might want to present. If you have ideas for September and October, please contact me. Everything, as usual, will be posted on our website, and you'll be able to see all of the offerings there. It's now my pleasure to move to the program itself, and I'm delighted to welcome Amy Stern, who is Senior Vice President, and Patrick Brightman, who is having some pretty serious technical difficulties this morning. Patrick is President of 3E Public Relations, and he will join us if he can. But Amy is well-equipped to lead the presentation. In fact, Amy is the face that you will recognize because Amy attends many of our events and has been a loyal member for a number of years. She has presented previously and is a very talented marketing executive. So I know that you will get a lot from today's presentation. This is not the time to shy away from marketing. In fact, it's the time to gear up and do more marketing. You've got a captive audience. Everybody's home. They're reading their emails. They're paying attention. So, Amy, thank you again to 3E Public Relations for sponsoring. The only other thing I'm going to do before I let you speak is explain a little bit about the logistics. All of you are muted and your cameras are off for the duration of the program. There is a question box, and we encourage you to post questions there. At about the 45 or 50-minute mark, I'll come back on and I'll read any questions that are in that box. Plus, I have some that Amy and Patrick kindly provided, so we'll have a little chance for some dialogue. Around 10:55, Chip Hallett, our President and CEO, will come back and we will close the program. So with that, Amy, I'm delighted to turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Barbara. It's a pleasure to be here. I hope everyone's doing well. As Barbara said, it has been challenging the past few months for sure, but in the last 24 hours as well with the storm. So let me just see if my colleague Patrick at least has audio before I get started. Patrick, are you there? I don't think so. Okay, well, I'm going to start, and if he is available, then Maya, I think if you can let me know that in some way or just interrupt, that's fine. So our topic today, as you know, navigating.
Amy, can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Hello, hello. I'm so glad you're here. Okay.
So am I. I wish it was easier.
So I was just about to get started. Before we talk about navigating a sound marketing strategy during turbulent times, I am going to turn this over to Patrick Brightman. I'm going to have Patrick tell us a little bit about 3EPR. And Patrick, why don't you do that? And then I can take over on some of the slides, and I'll give you a few cues when I know you can talk off the cuff, no problem.
All right, thank you. And again, everyone, I apologize. Yeah, Mother Nature was not cooperating with us this morning, but we will jump right in. And it seems like we should have added a slide or two about hurricanes to this presentation. But a little bit about the agenda first, as we have discussed, both Amy and Barbara. Now is not the time to silence yourselves from a marketing communications perspective, but you do have to make sure you're conveying the right messages. By doing that, you need to stay relevant with your customers, employees, strategic partners, and media. You have to be resilient, obviously, through these difficult times, and you have to resonate your messages with the right audiences, and that's what we will be discussing today. But as Amy said, first, let's just spend 2 minutes real quick about who 3E Public Relations is. Amy, the next slide, please.
I did advance it. I don't know if you can see it. I'm on the next slide. It says, who is 3EPR? Maya? Can you folks see my slide?
Hi, Amy. Yeah, I can see. I believe we can all see the who is 3EPR slide. Apologies, everyone. Patrick, did it advance for you yet?
Yes, yeah, I'm good. I can see it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So real quick, again, 3E Public Relations. We're based in Montville, New Jersey. And we specialize in PR, social media, and content creation. From what our clients, long-term clients tell us, we have that big agency expertise that you would find on Madison Avenue, but we have a mid-size agency philosophy, and that means you have a designated senior level person on all accounts, and you get the attention that you deserve. We have the ability to convert brand-centric messaging to newsworthy content. That's key because we want to make sure your messages can get into the media outlets so that your target audiences can see, listen, or read them. And one of the aspects that allows us to do that is we have long-standing media relationships. So we deliver national and regional press opportunities for our clients. We position the categories that our clients are in as relevant, taking the all ships rise with the rising tide philosophy. And then we transform your senior level executives to key opinion leaders so that they become the go-to resources for the media. And then now the next slide, Amy, please.
So,
and at that point, to Amy.
The current state of affairs we're all too familiar with. So we started with the global pandemic, as we know, back in March, and it's really been a bumpy ride ever since. In addition to the COVID-19 crisis, we've had a situation in this country with tremendous racial tension, political discord, unemployment, which may have impacted many of you personally and your businesses as well. And then, you know, with it came travel restrictions and supply chain disruptions, financial insecurity, business insecurity. So it's really been a trying time for everyone. But it is important to make sure that communication is still happening to your key constituents at this time. So as an agency, heard a lot of different things over the past few months from our clients and even from potential clients as well. Some of the things that may resonate with you are, should I proceed with my new product launch or postpone it for several weeks, maybe even several months? My largest and most significant trade show has been canceled. How can I continue to reach my target audience? And this has been true across many industries. We've seen major events canceled, from really big events like, you know, South by Southwest, and, you know, even minor meetings, but that might be significant to your industry. Other folks have said to us, should we craft and disseminate a public relations announcement that conveys our brand support for diversity and inclusion? And if so, how can we make sure that it will resonate with authenticity? And finally, how should I change my communication strategy internally now that we're all working remotely and social distancing, and how that is impacting employees? So today, Patrick and I are going to share with you 2 case studies that will bring some of the strategies that we've implemented to life. One will be that of a regional healthcare system, and the other an industrial B2B company. And then hopefully through the Q&A session at the end, we'll be able to bring in some other relevant examples and respond to your questions with some real life activities that we've implemented on behalf of our clients. So the first case study involves St. Peter's University Hospital. And for those of you that aren't familiar with St. Peter's, they're located in New Brunswick, New Jersey. The hospital is run by the Diocese of Metuchen. And what's really unique to St. Peter's is the fact that they're one of New Jersey's few remaining independent hospitals. So they're not connected to a major healthcare system at all. But that also presents other challenges. Other challenges as far as getting their brand messaging out there, because they're competing with some really big healthcare systems like Atlantic Health and Hackensack Meridian. And so it's really hard to make sure that their voice is heard. And that's what we help them do, to get their messaging out there. Their goal is to establish brand leadership around their commitment, which is prioritizing compassionate care and interpersonal connections on par with medical excellence. So if we kind of, you know, simplify that a bit, really what we're communicating on behalf of St. Peter's is we're a hospital that has quality medical care, especially in specific areas. But what sets us apart is the compassionate care and personal attention that you're going to get from the doctors that treat you, from the nurses, from the entire staff. And many of them live in the community in which St. Peter's is located and have worked there for 20 or 30 years. The challenges that we were faced with, as I mentioned before, St. Peter's is a single hospital. So we're competing with major healthcare systems in the region and throughout the state in order to have our voice be heard. And that means that we're competing not just for brand awareness, but also for media opportunities as well. The other challenge that was unique to the COVID-19 crisis is that we wanted to be able to share some positive stories with the audiences that the press are dealing with, because like most hospitals, we didn't want the news just to be about patients that were dying and the number of deaths and all of that. So we had to search for these positive story angles and then disseminate them to the media in hopes that they would cover our client. How we went about that was we came up with the theme compassionate care during crisis. And then we supported that theme by searching out and finding human interest stories that brought that theme to light. The results were national and regional media that included CNN and NBC New York. So again, for a small independent hospital that's really fighting major healthcare systems within New Jersey, to be able to get not just coverage here regionally, but beyond and on a national level was really significant. So I'm going to show you a few examples as to how we did this. We created several news hooks to interest the media in talking about our client. In this particular case, this was a segment that was featured on CNN, and the two people on the left are a father-daughter duo. They work side by side in the intensive care unit at St. Peter's University Hospital. They're dealing with the sickest of the sick, facing death every day. The father is a respiratory therapist, so he actually does the intubations when someone's put on a respirator. His daughter is an intensive care nurse. Not only were they working 12 to 16 hours without a break, many times, 7 days or more in a row, but then they went home, and how they dealt with, the psychological and the physical toll that the pandemic was taking was another challenge altogether. So we talked to the media about their story, about the relationship between a father and daughter, how much he admired his daughter but wanted to keep her safe, and vice versa. And through their story, we were able to convey the public trust that patients put in St. Peter's University Hospital. And this story aired not only on CNN, but on NBC New York and a lot of New Jersey media as well, including News 12 and the Home News Tribune. Other story angles that we used to tell St. Peter's story during the crisis were ones that established brand leadership and delivered optimism. So for example, this is a picture of two sisters who gave birth to their children on the same exact day. Because of COVID, they couldn't share a room, but what they did share was a common wall that connected their room. So they were able to kind of create a Morse code type system where they tapped on the wall to communicate. And this was a story that the media just loved. The thing for St. Peter's that was really exciting is St. Peter's is known as a hospital with maternal health services that are second to none. So we have a level 3 intensive care, neonatal intensive care unit at St. Peter's. We handle a lot of high-risk pregnancies at St. Peter's with very positive results. And just recently, for low-risk pregnancies, St. Peter's built a brand new state-of-the-art birth center that almost looks like a hotel, where mothers can deliver in what looks like the comfort of their own home, but they're steps away from emergency medical care should they need it. So this particular story angle was able to convey to the public the fact that St. Peter's was a leader in maternal health services, but it also delivered a sense of optimism during the crisis. The girls both talked about how they felt totally safe at St. Peter's because they had delivered their earlier pregnancies there as well. And again, this story to be featured on New York News was really critical because, again, we're competing with hospitals like NYU, Columbia Presbyterian. So for St. Peter's in New Jersey to get this public platform was quite significant. And again, was able to extend their brand awareness well beyond New Brunswick, New Jersey. We're also about promoting thought leadership. And so when it came to the pandemic, we had a relationship with a reporter at Forbes. And we talked earlier just a little bit briefly, and this will come up again, the importance of having established relationships with the media. So when a reporter reached out and said, I'm doing a story with a really tight deadline, and I need an expert, somebody in infectious diseases who can talk to me about why 45% of all Americans are still refusing to wear a mask, we immediately thought of Dr. Henry Riddell, who's the chief of infectious disease at St. Peter's University Hospital. The key to getting this placement and to getting Dr. Riddell featured as the only infectious disease doctor to be quoted in this Forbes article was our quick response time. The reporter was on a tight deadline. He only had a couple hours. We were able to call Dr. Riddell, get him immediately connected to John Brandon, the reporter, and as a result, Dr. Riddell was featured as an expert in, what we should be doing to stay safe during the pandemic. And again, national media for our client. The challenge to be heard and to be known as a quality healthcare provider in New Jersey, as I mentioned before, has been challenging because St. Peter's is only one hospital that's up against major healthcare systems. So another way that we were able to secure media for them was to pitch the media a kind of different story angle. We said to them, look, we know you're covering all the really big healthcare systems and what they're doing and how they're challenged with personal protective equipment for their staff. But would you be interested in hearing a different perspective? What is it like for CEO Leslie Hirsch at St. Peter's University Hospital, who's got one hospital? Is it more challenging to be a single hospital trying to fight this pandemic on all fronts? Or are there advantages because there's less bureaucracy and less red tape? And both ROI NJ and NJ Biz, two leading business publications in New Jersey, were really interested in hearing a different perspective and delivering the news from a different viewpoint. And Leslie Hirsch was featured in two back-to-back stories, one on the front page of ROI NJ. So I'm going to turn it back over to Patrick, who's going to share a case study about AirCo.
Thank you, Amy. And I think the reason why we chose these two case studies is to really showcase how the COVID-19 pandemic is affecting every industry in every way possible. And AirCo is an industrial B2B client of ours who does commercial grade boilers and hot water heaters. So they had a goal to maintain their thought leadership within that market, which is consulting engineers and facility managers and facility owners of hospitals, schools, prisons, and large commercial facilities. So they wanted to introduce a process to develop webinars for the sales force to help maintain that thought leadership because their sales force was very unfamiliar with doing webinars and was more the traditional get out and meet people face to face. The challenge that we had for AirCo was that there were budget reductions due to COVID-19. AirCo themselves was doing very well, but they are part of a public company, and other divisions and other companies within that umbrella corporate structure were not doing as well, so their budget was cut as a result. And then we also, as I mentioned, had limited experience among the sales force with webinars and using technology to help generate leads and close sales. So our strategy was to develop strategic opportunistic media relations to secure prominent editorial placements. We didn't want to just abandon the PR and media relations program, so we reduced it to meet their budget needs, but also focused on key outlets within the trade media and key opportunities that would allow us to convey that thought leadership and still have some prominent editorial placements. We also wanted to work with the sales team and the marketing department to consult on providing the best practices and establish a webinar template so that when the sales force had to reach out electronically and use technology, they would be proficient in it. The results that we were able to generate is we were still able to secure features in major media B2B outlets, focusing on COVID-19, but also generating some leads because, again, their sales were doing well. The market, they were considered an essential business, an essential service, so they were still having opportunities to grow and meet their sales numbers. We also established those protocols for the webinars. They're now in place by the sales force. They're out there doing webinars both to their distribution and sales channel, their rep networks, but also directly to customers so that they can continue to meet their sales goals and numbers. And the next slide we'll kind of go into a couple of examples. So one of the things that we did was secure the VP of marketing for a weekly podcast. One of the leading trade media properties and online property decided to do a podcast focusing on how COVID-19 was affecting everyone's day-to-day business. So we were able to get a 20-minute interview, the VP of marketing on that podcast. We were able to promote that podcast on social media once it was published on their website as well. So what we try to do with all of our PR and media placements is to really focus on how can we leverage them on websites of our clients, on social media, give it legs, as we like to call it, so that one placement can reach as many different people as possible. And this podcast was an example of that. The next slide talks about a more traditional PR placement, so to speak, and that is a print placement, both from a digital magazine perspective and the hard copy. And once again, this particular publication, a B2B publication, was focused on COVID-19's impact on what was going on in the marketplace. So we were able to secure an interview with a leading spokesperson from AERCO so that they would be included within the article itself, but as importantly for our lead gen program, to get a product placement as well within that segment, so that, again, it appeared online and in print, leveraged on social media as well. And the final slide in terms of this case study that we want to talk about today is, again, another one, but this one focused solely on the lead gen aspect of it. We wanted to make sure that AERCO was able to secure some sales and at least get some leads with this particular placement. Again, another digital media placement that also appeared in hard copy print, but this was strictly non-COVID-19 related. It talked about an install case study about how a hospital out in the Midwest was able to have an ROI, return on investment, of over 50% in 1 year by installing AERCO boilers within the facilities because of the reduction in operating costs and energy efficiencies associated with it. This particular piece, for the month it appeared and for 2 months afterwards, was the #1 tool in terms of generating leads for AERCO. So it was able to meet, again, their sales goals while also striking the thought leadership position that we wanted to achieve, all within staying within their reduced budget. And now I'll turn it back over to Amy to tell us how we did all of these things.
Thanks, Patrick. So why timing is everything. And we talk about that a lot in our industry, but it really is critical. What you say as far as the message that you're putting out there and how you say it are important, but when you say it matters just as much. So here's another example of how we had to kind of reposition, or another term that's overused probably during COVID is pivot, in that one of the clients that we have is a law firm, and they are a firm that advocates for expungements of misdemeanor crimes. And there are many states that do allow for expunging a criminal record, but there's all kinds of hoops that you have to jump through, and in many cases it takes a long time. So they had done a study about how many years it takes by state to get your record expunged for misdemeanor crimes, and this study they did was part of a press release that they wanted to announce, kind of bolstering their case for why expungement was important. The problem was, just as they were about to make that announcement via a press release, the COVID-19 crisis happened, and then there were bail reforms that were advocated primarily in New York State, and as a result of these bail reforms, which allowed folks to be released if they, couldn't, even if they couldn't come up with bail, and there was a rise in crime statistics. Then there was the Black Lives Matter movement. So we had to advise the client that the timing for the press release was really not good, and that it could actually backfire and kind of not really put them in the most positive light. And it certainly wasn't going to achieve the goals that they set out to achieve. So they held on to the press release and they did not release it. And there were some alternative strategies that we recommended to them. But timing really is important. We also like to say that when you go to the media, the first time should not be during a time of crisis. And that actually is not only true, but it served us extremely well. We were able to secure, as I mentioned before, 3 NBC TV segments in the New York metro market. Again, the most competitive media market in the country. And we were able to do that during a crisis because of several things. We had really strong story angles that tied to the COVID-19 crisis, but also we had a very strong relationship with one of the producers at the nightly news. So when we sent an email that was pitching our client or the story angle related to our client, she knew us and immediately read our email and responded quickly. The other thing was in the early time when the crisis first broke, many news stations, as adept as they are at producing the news and handling interviews, found it challenging to come up with alternative procedures since they couldn't send their reporters directly to the interview source because of COVID. So they couldn't send the reporter to the hospital, and they were not all that familiar with Zoom or some of these other platforms. So in the case of NBC, as shocking as it sounds, we actually set up the Zoom call for the producer with our clients, the two girls that deliver the babies. And as a result, because we were making their job easier, we were able to secure 2 additional segments later that week, also featuring St. Peter's again, and we facilitated the Zoom calls for the media during those cases. Windows of opportunity can open and close quickly. We talked about the Forbes example, where had we not responded within the first 2 hours, some other hospital and some other infectious disease expert would have been the one quoted, but we acted promptly, quickly, and were able to connect with our client in order to deliver that placement. The power of content in a crisis is something that's also important, and I'm sure many of you have heard the term content talked about over and over. It's one thing to have information on your website, but it's also critical that the information is valuable, but valuable to the audience that you want to reach. And it's also important that it stays up to date. So we often say that your website may be your most underutilized asset. And in often cases that is, in many cases that is true. For St. Peter's, the fact that their website was not only up to date, but had really valuable information that folks were looking for during the crisis, served them amazingly well. As I mentioned, they are known as a hospital that has expertise in maternal health services. And as a result, they were also one of the first hospitals that did not change the visiting policy that allowed a support person to be there during labor. So they had this competitive advantage. And as a result, there were folks who had plans to deliver at other hospitals, not only in New Jersey, but in New York City. And when they found that their support person or their husband could not be there during labor, they started to search for other hospitals that would allow that support person to be in the delivery room. And because St. Peter's included that information on their website, as well as a lot of the other positives that they could deliver in terms of maternal support, they were able to stay busy and convince patients that they could safely deliver during the crisis. Patrick touched on the fact that PR adds additional value and how we often and always repurpose the content that's created from PR placements across multiple platforms, whether it's on the website of our clients, via social media, and beyond. It's important to think about the kind of content that you offer. So be creative when you're thinking about what information that you are going to share and communicate, because it can come in many forms nowadays. And the more varied it is, the more interesting it is to your audience, and the more they'll come back again looking for additional information. So think about videos, infographics, slideshows, and even interviews with some of your key thought leaders. And that's the kind of information that folks are seeking out nowadays, and they'll return to your website time and time again if you put content on there that serves them well. Publishing blogs is another best practice that we recommend to clients, and it's extremely helpful because, again, there's usually valuable information that's available and educational information, and the more that you can offer content that serves your audience, the more that you'll be seen as a trusted resource. And eventually that will materialize and translate to sale. Creating downloadable content, if it's relevant, of course, on educational materials is also something that has helped our clients to navigate this crisis. So again, be a valuable resource for those constituents that you want to reach. And even if you're not actually selling the first few times you have an interaction, you're building that relationship, and ultimately you will see success. During turbulent times, making media relations count is significant. As we said in the beginning of the presentation today, it's really not a time to go dark or to be quiet. It's even more important now to keep that dialogue going between you and your prospective customers. So it's important when you're looking at media relations to really consider the news climate. When we talked about the expungement example, you don't want to be tone deaf to current events. And in fact, yesterday we had a client that was about to release a press release that had some significant news, but we actually advised the client to wait until early next week because we knew that with the storm hitting, all the media was talking about yesterday was the weather, and all they're talking about today is restoring power and the damage that was done across multiple communities. So for us to allow them to go ahead and disseminate their press release would not have resulted in anyone really picking up that news. So knowing our outlets is something that we really pride ourselves on. We make sure we know what was covered in the last 5 to 7 days, if not longer. So when we're going to pitch a story about our clients, we're certainly not pitching something that might have appeared the day before or even a few days prior, because we know what that outlet has covered. We're also in constant conversation with reporters and producers. And when we had the segment that ran on CNN for St. Peter's University Hospital, I remember specifically asking the producer after it was over what other topics she was interested in, or were there other news angles that they were looking at. And her response was, right now, as long as it relates to COVID-19 in some way, shape, or form, we're interested. Otherwise, we're not. So, you know, we try to keep an open dialogue and really have a pulse on what the media is covering. And we connect with freelancers. So if, you know, there isn't a standard reporter for a particular industry, but there's a freelancer that's constantly the one that's creating those news stories, we make sure to get to know that person so they know what sources we have available via the clients that we represent. Focusing on the media that reach your target audience is really what matters and nothing else. And that might sound a little bit obvious, but I use one example to illustrate this. We had a client that came to us and kept talking about wanting to be on the Today Show. But given the industry that that client was in, and given the potential customer that the client wanted to reach, the Today Show never would have been the right place for his message to be conveyed. So that's something that, you know, we often have to guide our clients to. It's more important that your message reaches the right audience through the right media than for you to want to be featured, you know, in something like the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. If that's where your audience is, that's not where you should be conveying your message. So I'm going to turn it back over to Patrick.
Thanks, Amy. And what we'll talk about now is what you can expect from social media and how to use it properly, and not just in these times, but throughout. So a brand social media platform, depending on how many pages they have, are a primary tool to dialogue with internal and external audiences in real time. The key with that is to make sure that you are focusing on the dialogue part and not the monologue part. You need to be engaging with your audiences, responding to comments, and to be out there and mingling, so to speak, in a virtual way. There are challenges associated with that because there is a lot of noise on the pages. There's a lot of skepticism with the types of posts and the content being presented on social media. So brands have to be very careful about how they position themselves, and it's a minefield that you have to tiptoe through to have success. And we always talk to clients and have clients take 3 basic steps when they want to do a successful social media program, and these are things that you can implement for your company as well. The most important, as I said, is to listen. You want it to be a dialogue, so you have to hear what your audience is saying and then respond quickly when necessary. Sometimes the response is very generic, and you can take the message offline to make it more specific to the request, but the immediacy of social media requires a response that's just as quick. you have to be real. We are dealing with audiences now, especially Gen Z and millennial. If that's your target audiences, they have grown up with marketing. So you have to be transparent with them and you have to be authentic. It's now more than ever because, as we mentioned, with a lot of the uprisings and a lot of the issues going on, you need to be true to your word or you will be called out for sure. And you have to show heart. You have to be socially responsible. And that goes back to being real as well. If you are going to announce an initiative and you're going to publicize it on social media, you need to show examples of what you're doing to support that charter or those initiatives. It's not so much bragging about it, but it's just to validate what you're doing and how you're giving back in this time of crisis to causes that are addressing the needs that are being discussed in mass. And that's the external audiences. But what we want to talk about next would be the internal audiences, as you mentioned very early on. Managing your employees, your partners, and your customer communications right now in this marketplace is very, very difficult. And we kind of talk about the fact that employees are teleworking, you're social distancing, so you can't go out and see customers and prospects like you were like, quarantine, putting us all at home and things of that nature. How do we effectively communicate so that people don't begin with innuendo and rumor and hearsay and create situations where there's misinformation being put out there? So from our perspective, what we always recommend to clients and things that you can implement is e-newsletters. Separate your internal and external newsletters so that they're going out to those specific audience with specific messages. The messages may be the same, and oftentimes they should be the same, whether it's internal or external, but how you communicate, the tone that you use, the position that you use should differ between whether it's an employee or a customer. The website, Amy mentioned it before, it's one of those resources that you can never overuse. You can post updates about COVID-19, you can post updates about new services. As we mentioned, what you're doing for the community, you can do it as a pop-up notice, which is not our preferred method because some people find that to be a little bit annoying when you go to a website and the first thing you could see is a pop-up. We would rather recommend that you take a designated COVID-19 page or a designated, community page and focus on what you're doing because that is less intrusive, but it's also something that can live on your website for a long term. And then virtual town hall and events, we want to make sure that you're still communicating, you're still seeing people, even though you're not face-to-face. 2D is better than no D. So you want to make sure that you have time to see people, schedule them. It helps maintain some level of chemistry, some level of goodwill with your employees. It keeps them up to date about what is going on, but also with your customers. Seeing a person's face, hearing their voice is something that can go a long way as you re-engage with the public in the next couple of months. So again, in summary, just to talk about what we've kind of emphasized over this presentation, there are 5 takeaways that when you're implementing your marketing communications in the next month or so, as we get to the next phase of openings and launching businesses again, timing is everything. The power of content in crisis and beyond cannot be undersold. Media relations, you need to make it count with smart pitches that make sense to the media as well as to your brand messaging. Have expectations that are realistic for social media, and then make sure your employee and partner communications and customer communications are effective and managed and consistent. So with that, I know we ran a little bit over, but I apologize again for the technical difficulties early on, but I think we'd like to open it up to any questions that people may have.
Great. Thank you very much, Amy and Patrick. We really appreciated all that advice. Starting with a couple of questions. The question about public relations versus advertising, especially when your budget is limited, are there times where advertising is advantageous? And what do you think about advertorials versus a straight ad?
I think so. If you're talking about a limited budget, the ROI, the return on investment of public relations, has always been much stronger than advertising. And the reason for that is when you have advertising, it is in one place for for a certain period of time, and then it can go away. And then advertising budgets and media placements or media flights, so to speak, for advertising can be very expensive. Where a public relations program, as Amy has mentioned throughout the presentation, we're pitching multiple outlets constantly. So the ability to secure multiple placements in multiple outlets is much greater in public relations. So there is a benefit associated with that. The other benefit of public relations is what's called the third-party endorsement. I mentioned it with the social media aspect in terms of the audiences today. Most consumers are really smart now, and they understand advertising, they understand marketing, and they understand what advertising is. So when you're doing third-party endorsements, which comes with the public relations placement, you're getting the media outlet, that editor, that influencer to basically say that this is a valid story, and this is something that you need to pay attention to. So there's an intrinsic value associated with that goes beyond the hard dollar amount. The advertorial content versus advertising content is a very good question. The benefit of an advertorial is similar to public relations, is that you can explain your message and you can explain your positioning in much greater depth than you can with an ad, straight out ad. Ads are, either a full page or 30 seconds or 60 seconds. They're very short snippets, and you can't really go into great detail about what your message is. And advertorial allows you to go a little bit more in depth. And again, going back to the target audiences today being much more intelligent than they were a generation ago, that added education can be the difference between securing that sale or gaining that mind share within your target audience, and just having you become a tagline that kind of comes in one ear and out the other.
Great. Patrick, that just made me think about something I just want to comment on, which is that publications like ROI and NJBiz will accept op-ed submissions, and they very often are looking for content. So this is an opportunity, if you want to get your thought leadership across, to submit an op-ed piece to one, and I'm sure there's other publications too, but those two are the ones that come immediately to mind. I know that they're always looking for people to submit.
Yeah, I'm glad you added that part too, because op-eds can be extremely valuable for thought leaders. And I know that we're actually in the process of working on one with one client and just submitted one on behalf of another. So yeah, definitely something that can be used if it's done right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another question on social media is a lot of reporters are on social media now, and they might have their handle listed in an article. When is it appropriate to contact a reporter via social media, and when is it not appropriate?
I think, Barbara, the rule of thumb that Amy and I and our team subscribe to is you can contact media via any avenue, whether it's social media, email, or phone call, as long as you have a legitimate story to pitch or to discuss with them, and as long as you understand who that media outlet is and who that reporter is. Especially in the case that the reporter has a public profile on social media and they publicize that public profile on when they do stories, then they are basically giving you the green light to contact them via that platform. But again, you just need to make sure you're contacting them with something that they're going to find benefit in and find interest in. Mm-hmm. Amy and I have been doing this for a really long time, both of us 25 plus years, and I think both of us have heard on more than one occasion, countless occasions actually, where editors have said, we really appreciate the fact that you guys have done your homework. You know what I cover, you know the stories I'm interested in, and you're coming to me with something that I can use. Too often, honestly, the PR profession gets a little bit of a bad rap because people don't do that enough. So again, as long as you have a legitimate story idea and something that is relevant to that particular reporter's beat and what they cover, then you can use social media as a tool to reach out to them.
Okay. I'll just add to that too, and a little bit common sense, but when you do reach out to the media too, you want to make sure that your message isn't just totally self-serving because you want to push your brand message out there. You have to think about who is it benefiting? Are you offering a solution to something? It's the audience that you're serving. And if you think of it that way, I think that helps people to actually communicate in a way that the press is more likely to be receptive to.
Mm-hmm. And Amy, I think to your point on timing, that to be cognizant of things like what you said about this week, that if you have a story that isn't completely time sensitive, and you can take into account something else that's happening in the world, then it is better to hold back and wait before you try to share that message, because it might just get lost.
Yeah, I think that's been really hard for a lot of companies during this crisis too, especially like clients that have had a product launch that is like months and years maybe in the making, and they're kind of been gearing up for this big announcement or this release. But again, you know, to release it at the wrong time, you know, it's just not going to serve you well. It's not going to get you the results that you need. And it's not like you're going to be able to release it and then if it doesn't go well in a few weeks, go back and redo. You're not. So it's as painful as it has been for certain companies, holding back or waiting, even if it's, you know, longer than they might like, in the end will probably be much more beneficial.
Mm-hmm. And to your point about reacting quickly, in the example of Forbes and St. Peter's, I had an experience with a submission that was needed within 45 minutes. It was that fast. Either get it in by 5:15. It's a Friday afternoon. Get it in by 5:15, or it's not going to be considered. So you just have to be able to have content ready and be able to react if press happens to contact you.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally, you know, the early bird catches the worm, and like we said, it's competitive. So if you're not there, some other CEO is going to get that, you know, soundbite. Some other brand is going to get that placement or that opportunity. You have to react quickly. You know, sometimes it's beyond our control, especially like when we're dealing with the hospital. Sometimes, you know, we were lucky that Dr. Riddell was available, the infectious disease doctor, and we could get him on the phone. Sometimes the doctor's in surgery. So in a case like that, you know, you can't always help it. But like, you know, we do try to explain to clients that some of the best opportunities, you really do have to react extremely fast.
All right, well, I'm going to turn it back to Chip to make closing remarks. I want to thank the two of you, and especially for overcoming all of the challenges today. And note that your contact information is on the screen currently. So I encourage everyone to follow up with Amy and Patrick to see how free EPR can be helpful. Chip, it's all yours.
Thanks, Barbara. And thank you, Amy and Patrick, very much for sharing with us this morning. And I know there were a lot of technical difficulties. I had trouble towards the beginning too getting on. So I really appreciate your sticking with us and presenting this content today. And certainly, you know, you hit those key points, and you know, relationships matter no matter regardless of what you're doing, and whether it's trying to get a customer or trying to tell a story. And that's so important. And we hope here at NRBP we can help deepen your relationships and look to do that through various ways all the time. You know, competition is keen, as you pointed out too there, and to be seen in a positive way is certainly very important. And seeking professional help is always a good idea. So there's a lot of appreciation for what you, Amy and Patrick, bring to the table, and we thank you for sharing that with our members today.
Thank you.
We look forward to having our members join us for our additional programs. Barbara mentioned at the top of the hour here, our cybersecurity webinar next week, presented by Citrin Cooperman, reimagining law enforcement and mending community police relations on the 18th. as another part of our diversity, equity, and inclusion mini-series will also be a very good program, and we hope you'll join us. Those of you that are having trouble overcoming your communications and power woes, I hope that comes to you very quickly. We look forward to no more disruptive incidents in the near or the long term. So everybody be safe. Thanks again, Patrick and Amy. Take care.